Now that we have everything set up for the installation of Mergin Maps, we will go first over a quick overview about the system requirements or machine requirements. So generally speaking, for a large or a relatively large team size of about 25 people and often synchronization of those team members, please consider a CPU of a machine with 4 vCPUs, and at least 8 GB of total memory. This is the recommended size of a VM to deploy Mergin Maps. Of course, even smaller footprints can be achievable, such as 2 VPUs and 8 GB or 6 GB. If your team is not that big and your data is not that sizable, this should be very sufficient to have Mergin Maps running on your host machine. Of course, a low latency and high bandwidth environment is preferred because we are talking about hundreds of megabytes of data flying around in between your field team members, if they synchronize on the field or after they return to the office, and in between your host machine where the platform will be. Here a bit of an overview about the infrastructure that we'll be deploying in the next steps. So basically, Mergin Maps is composed of a Postgres database that holds the application data, a Redis instance that is handling asynchronous tasks as well caching from asynchronous tasks mainly from the Celery backend, as we will see, a Celery bit instance in order to be the task orchestrated, as we say, from Celery, one Celery worker which is responsible for the workers to perform the tasks, the server backend of Mergin Maps, we simply call it the server side of Mergin Maps, and then the web application or the front end of Mergin Maps. On top of everything, there is a proxy, and Nginx proxy that serves Mergin Maps in a reverse proxy type of configuration. On the firewall port side, if you don't enable SSL, as you should, so the only needed port by default is 8080, but of course you can change this on deployment time and we can see it. Now we will go through the deployment itself. Of course, first we will need to have the Git repository cloned in our machine. So most of Linux operating systems have already Git enabled, but if you don't have it, of course you need to install it first. And then we will go through some of the steps that will be needed. In this case, we will replicate a deployment of an enterprise edition, so we need to navigate first to deployment and enterprise, and from there we will need to copy our environmental template file in order to produce our production ready environment file with all the environmental variables needed set up as we have seen on the previous video. So I will open a terminal window right now. So we are under our home folder. I will clone the Git repo here, but of course you on your host machine you should have like a dedicated path to your deployment, especially if you use like a partition with fast disks and etc. to improve performance of Mergin Maps. Of course you will need to deploy Mergin Maps there. We will go to the GitHub page, and then I will grab the Git HTTP HTTPS URL, because I don't have Git configured on this specific virtual machine, and I will do the Git clone from here. So as we mentioned, we now navigate to server, deployment, and enterprise. From here, we will check later that we have here our building blocks of our Git of our Mergin Maps. Sorry, I was checking here that this is not presenting here our Eden file, so they should be as even. The env template should be a Eden file, so that's why it's not shown here by default on this Ubuntu desktop edition. But we simply copy it to a new file that must be named prod.env by default, or you can also change it on deployment time. So we just simply copy the template file for the environment variables, and we will check later on some of the settings here. So now we are ready to start working on our prod.env file in order to set up properly the deployment of Mergin Maps.